got my notes here. Tere tulemast. Thank you all for coming today. There's been a lot of activity over the last few weeks, so we really appreciate your continued support and your continued interest as the project evolves. As you know, this is the second of 4 information sessions that are planned. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Orva Damberg, and last year I ran for the Estonian House Board because I'm inspired by the vision of the new Eesti Keskos. For me, it represents a unique opportunity at a critical juncture in time to revitalize our Estonian community and culture and solidify our cultural footprint in both Toronto and hopefully beyond. I'm a typical first-generation eestlane. I led a double life. Certainly, it was not as exciting as James Bond, but many of us, rarely did my Canadian life and my Estonian life cross paths. In the 60s and 70s, during the height of the Cold War, it was difficult to explain that Estonia was a country. And yes, we did speak Estonian, and being named Orve was no picnic either, in a classroom of Wendy's and Susans and Nancy's. And in my double life, Eesti Maja was like a second home, and I grew up here. My children were born in the 90s, after Estonia regained its independence. Katrina, Sonia, and Kenny Dobson, all of whom are now in their early 20s, also grew up here. Lasteaed, Eesti kool, gümnaasium, guided, scoutid, rahvatants, laulukoor, laulupidu, leeripidud, and being involved in Estonian activities added richness and a unique dimension to their lives. We owe our thanks and our appreciation to our immigrant parents and grandparents. They carved out this space for us, and the community flourished. But over the years, our needs have changed, the world has changed, and our community has evolved, and we should embrace the future. So why should we move to Eesti Keskos? Okay, nobody throw anything at me. This project has a number of facets, and for those of you who read the articles and comments on the internet, it's arguably very emotional and very complicated. My daughter Katrina recently wrote about her experience in the Estonian paper. And of course, there were the usual negative comments from anonymous users, including one that speculated I had influenced my 23-year-old daughter, which is really wishful thinking. I wish I could do that. But the heart of the article was about how difficult it is to maintain a strong connection with the Estonian community from a distance, and how the Eesti Keskos, in its central location and its visionary design, is important for that. The reason I bring up the article is because I felt the same way in my 20s. I remember feeling disconnected from the Estonian community. Activities had been such an integral part of my life for so long, and now suddenly I had very little reason to go to the Estonian House. I wanted to stay connected to the community, but how? And I think my children's generation really care about an easily accessible central meeting place, good food, maybe some local craft beer, a place to socialize and meet their friends, along with cultural events, and of course, good Wi-Fi. And as a community, Estonians have evolved from a post-war immigrant generation trying to keep their heritage alive during the Cold War to a global, multi-generational community from a country that invented Skype and is a recognized leader in technology and cybersecurity, and the first country to offer e-residency, a country that is building a citizen state rather than a nation state. I think our strategy in Toronto needs to be equally as global and ambitious. The Eesti Keskos is the opportunity for our community to grow and thrive and reach beyond Toronto to become a hub, a home for Estonian activities and culture. We're currently in the midst of more user group consultations. It is an opportunity for all of our groups and individuals to think about how they see the future. Instead of recreating status quo, I really encourage people to ask themselves these questions. What could be done differently? How could it be done better? How can we use technology and space and resources to engage as many participants as possible, both in Toronto and elsewhere? These questions don't have easy answers, but it is incumbent on us to see the future so that our future generations will be engaged and passionate about Estonian culture. I think it's time to retire our double lives The ASD Guest Coast reflects the growing and future needs of our community, not only by its visionary architecture, its use of flexible space, the openness and light, as well as the opportunity for retail and events. Let's share our Estonian art and music and culture and technology via the ASD Guest Coast, located in the vibrant downtown culture corridor. I think the world needs more Eestlus. Now I'd like to introduce Scott and Ivan, who's going to be our MC and our moderator for this evening.
Great. Thank you very much, Orve. And hello, everybody. My name is Karin Evand, as many of you know, and it's my pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you so much for coming. How many were at the last session, the first session? Well, that's really wonderful. That's great. Thank you for coming again. A lot of the information that you will hear tonight is the same as the last session, because a lot of, obviously, there's a lot of detail, and I think it's good for everybody to hear it again. I know that every time I listen to it, I do learn something new. There's just so much to absorb, but as promised, we will be providing some updates as well as to what's new and what's been happening over the last month or so. So we do encourage you to come to the next two sessions. There's two additional ones coming up. The next one is March 14th, and then the one after that is April the 4th. Same time, same place. So look forward to seeing you there. And again, there will be more information at those two sessions as well. And some of the, as last time, quite a few of the volunteers and experts who are working on the Estonian Center project are with us tonight, a lot of them in the front area here, and some of the Estonian House board members, and we'll be very happy to answer any and all of your questions after we have the main presentations. And those speakers tonight are Alar Kongats, who is the project architect. He'll be giving you an overview of the design of the new center. And there are some renderings and floor plans at the back there, so I'd really encourage you to take a look at those and see what the potential of the new space is like. And as Orve was saying, the space is very flexible and nothing is completely carved in stone. So we are having consultations with the community right now. So this is the time for everybody to have their input. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who is Alar Kongats, the project architect.
There's nothing really changed in terms of the design. We don't have new drawings and that, but what we have been doing is meeting the various Estonian community groups over the last, I would say the last month, and also advancing the approval process with the City of Toronto, and those are the two things I'm going to talk about tonight. As you know, you've all seen most of these images. This is a view of the proposed center looking across from the park across Madison Avenue. So Madison Avenue here, Tartu College is here, 9 Madison parking lot is in this location, 11 Madison here, and then there is the POP space, which is the privately owned public space that is part of the agreement in purchasing the property with the city. This is a view looking north along Madison in front of the proposed plaza. There's a drop-off envisioned for the front, so it is a one-way street, so that there is an advantage in terms of not having cross-traffic on the street, so it is possible to have a lay-by that is not unlike what you might get in a public, at a public library or a community center where someone can drop off family, and there may be a limited 30-minute parking space, so if you had to run in quickly to the bank or had to take your kids upstairs to Lustide or a dance program, that there's a place to drop people off. This is a view as you come, well, I should go back one, the entrance is in this location here, so it's a covered entrance. It's approximately 20 feet or so from the street, so it's pretty immediate. This is a view of the entrance lobby. It's meant as an active lobby with potentially a cafe. A view, again, looking across Madison Avenue at night with 11 Madison here and the Estonian Center here. Well, so this is just kind of another notch in the line that I've shown before. So last week we did meet with the City Planning Department and also Heritage Services with the city. And that meeting was a kind of to inform them of the site plan approval process in terms of the drawings and what we were going to be presenting or submitting as part of the approval process. And that went well. The Heritage people, as you may know, Madison Avenue is in the Heritage District, and Heritage is actually very supportive of the project. A view of the hall looking out. So again, as I mentioned earlier, this past few weeks have really been about meeting the community groups and looking at the needs of our community. Again, we've met with the Lustide Kindergarten, the sports groups, including the folk dance. Last night we didn't meet with the schools, but we met with guides and scouts and chefs here at Estimaya. And there's in another week we're looking at meeting with the arts group. So a couple of things that have come out is one, these aren't so much answers, but what we've been trying to do is compile all the needs of the community to get a kind of database that we can then work with and develop a program for the new center, and specifically how many rooms, how many classrooms that are required, the amount of storage that might be required, when the place would be most actively used. And so some of the things that have come out so far is that there is a kind of congestion of Saturday morning activities where almost everything within the community a good chunk of what happens within the community takes place on Saturday mornings. So there is a kind of how to accommodate the number of people, and it could be up to 200 people. There's obviously storage requirements. If the space is multi-use, each group does want a place where they can secure their own paraphernalia and support material that they run their programs with. There was discussion about, oh, that's better. It's way better. I thought it was my eyes. Or just tired of reading the issue of the stage came up. We have shown a kind of temporary stage location on the drawings. That's not fixed, but certain issues that came up, that it's big enough for Rafa dance, it's big enough for fashion shows, it can accommodate plays, that there is support space to support those activities, including a green room that might be located adjacent to the main hall or where the auditorium is. One of the interesting things that has come up is the issue of parking and transportation. Almost every group we met with to date, parking has not been a super important issue. Obviously, people needed to find a place for parking, but it has not been a kind of do or die situation in terms of needing it or not needing it. The proximity of public transportation was actually a more attractive component of for the location than the parking, the issue of parking. I think we mentioned last time Tartu College has committed a number of parking spaces for use to the community when there are events going on. Another important takeaway when we met with the chefs last night, the issue of investing in a proper kitchen and that came up, and that is a kind of a consideration. The other consideration that came up with the chefs, and an important one, is what is the appropriate size for the hall? I mean, today we've kind of positioned the hall to match the size of the hall that we're in right now, but is that the correct size? Does it need to serve 400 people in a sit-down dinner or 300 people in a sit-down dinner? And the kind of feeling was that it's better almost to keep the hall at a reasonable size, a smaller size, and provide the support for the hall so that the hall can be properly serviced, so that there is a functioning kitchen, there's a backup space, there's storage space, so that the hall becomes something that you can reasonably rent out to events, and also to make sure that customers and people come back and recommend the hall at future times as well. And the other big thing that came up was the rents. Everyone was interested in knowing how the new hall was going to affect the rent and whether they can afford the space. And I think David will talk to that a bit. So this was just, I'll just go through these quickly, but this is with Lustai, these were a series of priorities. And what we're going to do with all this is develop a very sort of technical data sheet, functional program where we'll identify the size of each of the classrooms, the number of classrooms, the requirements for power, audio, visual. And so it'll be a kind of design Bible that once we're finished. So every group has their own considerations. The issue of flexibility certainly is a big one. Certainly with the sports group, if we have a sporting function, there's a requirement for lines on the floors and designations and markers, and how do you deal with that? And also, how do you deal with the finishes in the hall? So where functions, you know, for a dining reception type event or a sporting event, those are all important considerations in terms of the design. Guiding Scouts had a similar set of requirements in terms of you know, giving us the number of participants that they might have, the need for storage space, the need for individual display space so that they can personalize the space. The chefs, as I mentioned before, were concerned about the fit out of the kitchen to make sure that the main hall was going to be a viable place for receptions. So I'll just quickly go through the plans, and again, most of you have seen this. This is a site plan, so the center is in this location here, 11 Madison here, the parking lot in this location here, Madison Avenue here, Tartu College here. So there is parking on the street, where I mentioned the lay-by, or sort of temporary parking could happen and drop off in this zone here. It is a one-way street coming down this way. So if you are dropping someone off, you are also from a passenger side exiting, you know, onto the sidewalk without having to cross the street. This is the lower level of the basement. And again, we have shown some area designated for either a kitchen or meeting room or washrooms and that, but all of that is flexible. None of that is cast in stone. And this will be a bit of a puzzle once we get all the data and the requirements from meeting all the groups. Then we'll be able to work on the puzzle to make sure that everything fits within the space. But there is large chunks of continuous space on each floor, so it is divisible in terms of each of the community group needs. As you may know, that there is the subway tunnel that is in this location here, adjacent to the lower level of the center. So we cannot build further than the line that is shown here. That's the one restriction at the lower level. On the upper level, we can build across and over and top of the subway. That is not an issue. So it's envisioned that the main entrance to our center would be in this location here. Again, Madison Avenue being here, so it would come off the square. It would have a covered entrance so that if you're waiting, there is sort of overhead protection with rain. If it's raining or snowing, and the car drop-off is in this location here. The house potentially would have its own entrance, and that was actually something that the Heritage Committee was interested in preserving, so that the house, 11 Madison, in terms of its function on the street, functioned the same way. It did have its own entrance as other houses do on the street. So as you come in, the image that we showed, potential cafe here, leading up to an elevator and central stair that takes you up to the second level. There's also space here for a leasable space. It could be the Estonian consulate offices on the ground floor, and then across the way, potentially commercial space that could be leased out. Potential client could be the Estonian Credit Union. On the next level up, again, the elevators are centrally located here. So it basically takes you to the main hall. The main hall is also divisible in terms of making it into a number of smaller halls. And then there are two wings that define the courtyard, so they become a kind of quadrangle that you would see in a sort of a college or university building that define the edges of the square as a kind of an outdoor room. There's also support space, storage space for the main hall here, and also where I mentioned a green space, or it could be a catering space where you're bringing things up if the kitchen happens to be on the lower level, so that you can act as a servery for the hall. The 11 Madison is the potential of having office space, could be leased out, or they could potentially become community use rooms as well. And then there's breakout space for the main hall on each side, so that if you're having a function in the main hall, there's smaller spaces to have, sort of quieter conversations and get away from the main hall. There's been some questions previously about the size of the hall, where we've drawn out the red triangles. So the hall that we're in right now, from outside wall to outside wall, is defined by this red line here, and then the stage is defined by this line here. So the halls are very similar in terms of area, and actually it would be larger if you added the adjacent breakout space where you could have a bar, or in the evening after a reception there could be food set out as well, or tables and chairs could be moved to the wings, and you could have a dance floor in the center of the hall or in an appropriate location. The upper level, so if we go to the third floor, there's an opportunity to subdivide and create a number of meeting rooms or classrooms. We've shown two sort of larger classrooms that are approximately double the area of the Lasteaed classrooms that are downstairs. So if you divided those in two, you would potentially have 4 classrooms that are, again, equivalent in size. There's a sort of a lounge area for parents. There's also another potential multi-purpose meeting room adjacent to that as well. And also the attic space in the existing house could make for a wonderful children's library. The other sort of main feature of the development is the use of the roof space as a green roof. So it would become the more private outdoor space as opposed to the space that the public could have access to at grade. Although that space could be used by the community for receptions and that as well, it would be sort of cordoned off in terms of you could put a tent up as well. But the roof is totally private and it's accessible. The elevator comes up, as do the stairs. There could be a children's play area, there could be an area for receptions, again, or an outdoor pavilion on top of the roof that is temporary in nature. There's also a mechanical room envisioned for the rear of the property. There is a future development in this location here being proposed, so this would act as a screen for a potential parking garage that would butt up against it. So it would act as it would act as a screen to that garage. There'd be a secondary means of egress, potentially down and up, with a sort of feature stair at this end. And again, it becomes a kind of rooftop garden for the community. obviously, it's valuable shoreline, so any donations would be appreciated. And thank you.
Olar, thank you very much, and I always learn something new every time I listen to the presentations that you make. The interesting thing, too, is that the chefs' meeting that took place, one of the consultations, that actually was partially as a result of some of the comments we heard at the last session, where there was a lot of interest in the local chef community in providing that consultation. So we were able to pull that together, and it just turned out to be incredibly valuable. So it's my pleasure now to introduce David Kalm, who's our project manager.
Just wait a moment here while my presentation loads. Thank you for coming to see us again. It's always a pleasure to speak with the community. My name is David Kalm. I think you all are starting to get to know me now. I'm one of the project managers. Rob Deutschman sitting in the front here is another. I know a lot of you have been to the earlier presentations, both on the 12th and on the 31st, so this will be a lot of repetitive information. With that in mind, I will try to go as quickly as possible so that we don't bore you, but there are a few updates within the presentation. So, once again, what we'll be looking at tonight is the structure of the project, just from a management perspective, the project management team, the execution team, and then we'll be spending most of the time on the due diligence update and questions. I'm afraid I have to do this again. Both properties are under contract now, and there is confidentiality agreements associated with both of those contracts. So we need to be careful about what I disclose opposite purchase price and the identity of the Broadview purchaser. The central hub of the management team is the steering committee, and that's made up of 8 individuals, 2 from each of the 4 orgs. There's a principal member that is made up of the presidents of each of the 4 orgs, and then there's a secondary dedicated representative that provides continuity to the board. You'll see them located at the top here. That's the steering committee. They are an executive committee that really makes the decisions, yes or no, and they're surrounded and supported by working committees around the edge. The working committees actually get into the nitty-gritty and decide on the project direction, and then we'll come to the steering committee with recommendations, and the steering committee will then give a yes or a no to the recommendation, and then the working committees can continue on with the work. So we have a capital campaign committee, which is our fundraising committee. We have a legal tax subcommittee, which is looking after the purchasing entity and tax concerns. We've got the building committee, which is looking after mainly what Olar is doing, and the design and the construction of the new center. Then we have the Broadview Sale Committee, which is looking after the disposition of all the properties on Broadview. And we have a communications committee that's done a great job for us with all these information meetings and also the public meetings that we've had with the ratepayers in the Madison area. In the middle are Rob and I, which is the center of the hub. Everything is, I guess, theoretically supposed to flow through us. And then we have the architect. We have a full-time accountant on the project to look after things. And we have Gordon, who you've met this evening, who's our communication lead. And over top of it all, we have Thomas Koger. He's a CA, and he provides independent oversight to the project, just monitoring our processes and our financial statements monthly. So going on to the, this is now what I call the execution team. This is really outside consultants that are working on the project right now. We have the steering committee at the top, working committees in the middle, and then Rob and I here. And then we have 5 directives that we're really looking after from an implementation point of view. We've got the planning side of things, which is for the planning of the Madison property, design of the Madison property, real estate, which is really the acquisition and disposition of properties. We have the legal committee here that's working on all the legal entities and such, and then we have the capital campaign. All of those directives are supported by a series of outside consultants. Everybody in a white box there is an outside consultant that is hired by the project. The due diligence process, we'll get into that now. The costs have been borne by the three orgs, ECU, ESK, and Tartu. The results are reviewed and approved by all 4 organizations, primarily the steering committee, and we're nearing completion now. The information meetings obviously are underway, and we are making progress every day. So the focal points of due diligence, we've gone over this before, but really it's the source of funds, which is what do we have for money to pay for the project? Use of funds, which is what does the project cost in simple terms? Long-term sustainability, basically will the project support itself with its operations to keep the project going on the long term, and then we have the legal structure, which is very important, opposite our ability to purchase and operate the new project. So we'll focus on the source of funds now. There's really 3 primary source of funds that we've been concentrating on. There are others, and we are starting to investigate those now that could add support to the project financially, but the primary one is obviously the sale of the Estonian house. The equity from the founding organizations is the second, and the third is a capital campaign, meaning fundraising. So getting into the sale of the Estonian house, what we did was we shortlisted, or not shortlisted, but we actually identified 16 potential purchasers that we pre-qualified and felt that they were a good fit for our project and to look at our property. They were all interviewed and talked to extensively, and then they were shortlisted down into five potential purchasers, and we actually went through the letter of intent exercise with those firms, and those ranged from about $12 to $18 million in over the range. We found one that was preferred. It was a senior care provider. It had the strongest offer with the best potential to achieve the highest price. And we also felt that there was a bonus with the senior care provider in that the senior care use was much more palatable to the local ratepayers in this area, as opposed to another condo coming into the area. The senior care is a quiet use. It's a low traffic use. It provides employment, and it also provides a service to the community in that it provides care for the neighborhood's seniors. The letter of intent was signed, and then an agreement of purchase of sale was drafted and also signed. So who is the purchaser? They're a leading owner and operator in the senior living sector. They have hundreds of properties across Canada. They're one of North America's largest provider of senior care. They're owned by a large pension fund, which with over 100 billion in assets. So this isn't your normal aggressive developer that may or may not see its way through the purchase. They intend to buy the property, hold the property, and operate a business on the property. So it's a very long-term play with long-term profit goals. And they will also offer, they will consider, anyway, having a dedicated Estonian section in the new facility, which would be a nice way to continue on our legacy here at this site. The Broadview sale details, as I said, the deal has been executed. It's really conditional on 3 items. There's the vendor due diligence, that's us. So we have a period at which we can either still accept or refuse the deal. The purchaser due diligence for the same. They've actually already started that. You maybe noticed that they were doing some drilling in the parking lot here. So they were doing their geotech and environmental research there. And then it's also conditional on for up to 18 months to achieve rezoning. And that's very important because the price is actually dependent on the amount of square feet that they get approved at the planning department. They're very much in line with us that they are trying to go for a considerable amount of square feet, which helps with our sale price. And also, as part of the deal, it's 2 deposits at $500,000 each. There's a leaseback period that's part of the deal, which is a 15-month leaseback. So that starts after the property would close. So after rezoning, 18 months from now, we get to lease back the property for 15 months, which gives us a window to stay in this property while we construct the new site. So that's a very positive part of the deal. So this is just a graphic of what we were talking about before, but basically a simple schedule of the project. With the construction of the new Estonian Center on the top and the Broadview deal on the bottom, the Broadview deal starts immediately and goes for about 18 months of rezoning with an anticipated close down in October of next year. And then there's a 15-month leaseback period. So that gives us a pretty generous amount of time. If we start our detailed design in June, that gives us 10 months to go through design and tender and building permits, and then construction of the site for 15 months gives us about a 6-month safety cushion at the end of the project in case we have some delays, where we can still remain in our building here and finish off the construction of the new center. So now we'd like to move to sources of funds, or we're still in sources of funds, sorry, but the capital campaign, which is the fundraising portion of it. We've hired a campaign consultant. He has just come on board about 3 weeks ago. The campaign, he's going to start with a feasibility study. It's underway. There's a series of interviews of a selected cross-section of our community, and the point of it is to try and get an idea of what kind of funds we think we can raise from our community. That'll provide some clarity into this variable source of funds. It's difficult for us to gauge, what we could raise, so he is going to help us with that question. The good news is that the project is attracting the attention of benefactors. We've got some discussions going on with some term sheets that are imminent. These benefactors are most definitely interested in naming rights of the new center, and that seems to be what's motivating them to come forward. So a very simple slide here, but basically, because some of these sources are variable, the total of our sources of funds is a range. And so when we look at that graphically, what we have is if we take the minimums of the land pricing, the contribution from the 4 orgs and from the 3 orgs, and our minimum expectations for our capital campaign, we end up with a number of about $18 million. And then with variable pricing primarily in the land and different success rates maybe with the capital campaign, we can see this being easily in around the $23 million mark. So that's really the range of funds that we're looking at. That will become important when we're talking about uses of funds, which is the next one on our list. Uses of funds, again, is the cost of the project. And these are items like land, hard costs, which are like the bricks and sticks construction cost, soft costs, which range from the consultants you saw earlier, lawyers, advertising, it could be a multitude of things. Financing, which is not a huge component in this project, but there will be a necessity for some interim construction financing. And then, of course, contingency, which is really your safety factor for your construction process. So the other use is land, of course. There's two pieces of property that are the focus for this project. Here's Tartu, and we have acquired or got this piece, 9 Madison, under contract, and the bank has owned this property for quite some time. That's 11 Madison. So as I said, 9 Madison is the letter of intent was signed when we were in April. We were just at the letter of intent stage. Now we have an agreement of purchase of sale that's signed. It remains conditional on our due diligence efforts. It's a fully executed agreement. We've got a very attractive price. We've been very successful at negotiating a good price for the property. The closing is scheduled to occur after development approvals, which are anticipated to be around August 2018. We're looking to go through the Committee of Adjustment route as opposed to the rezoning route, and that was discussed at our SPA meeting just the other day, and that's looks like we're on track to do that. We've already paid a purchaser deposit of $100,000. It's a stratified title. The city is very sensitive about tall buildings being on that site, so we're limited to 4 stories in height. And as Allard mentioned, we have a POPs agreement on that site as well, which is that center square that is a privately owned public space. The 9 Madison, where are we really as far as planning goes? The site plan agreement is almost, I guess, where drawings are basically done. They're going to the planner on Friday to be bundled and put a bow on them and submit them to the city. And then once those are going to the city, TTC is immediately copied on the plans and they begin their review, and that runs concurrent with the SPA or the site plan approval application. So they'll run a review and then they will specify at that point what the level of technical review will be on the project. And that will give us an idea of what kind of monitoring requirements we'll have during the construction phase. 11 Madison, the project will be purchased from the ECU and brought into the project. The transfer of the property will follow the receipt of 9 Madison planning approval, so that's a month afterwards, so somewhere around September. And that represents a project cost of about $3 million to the project. So now, I know you've been through this before, so I'll go through it quickly, but what we needed to do was build up a matrix of construction costs so that we could play with the construction costs to match our sources of funds. And so what we've done is we've divided the project into 3 components. Component A is the horseshoe component that you see so commonly in the renderings. And then we have component B, which includes the 11 Madison house and the annex addition in behind. And then we've looked at component C, which is just the house without the annex on it. So again, there's the whole project all together. We've got A, B altogether, and C is just the house. So moving forward, you'll get to see now, don't really concentrate on the individual areas here. We don't intend to build any of them individually, but what we've done is paired them up in two different ways where we have our base case. This is the case that we're all working towards, is A plus B. So that's the horseshoe, the house, and the annex in behind the house. And then we have a contingent case that we are working on that will just give us an alternative depending on our sources of funds that we finally end up with. But so there you go. You get the A and B again, just to remind you, and A and C. But so what we end up with is a total cost of $22 million for the base case. So that's what we're trying to target. And then the contingent case is about $17 million. And the reason the contingent case is mainly being pursued is if we look back to April when we originally put the proposal to Estimaya, we were targeting an area of about 23,000 feet and 11,000, and $18 million in cost. So we have a very similar option on the table, but as we've gotten into the design, Allah's gotten to know the site and has been able to push the building out and expand the building on site, so it's considerably larger now, and we think much more useful. So now graphically that's the information all on one slide. So here's our sources of funds. So if you recall, the base is about 18 million, and as we do better with the rezoning of this property, that increases. So the core, the contingent case here is about $17 million, which we have in hand. And so the funding is already adequate for the base case, or for the contingent case, and now we're seeking to do the whole case, which represents a cost of about $22 million, and we're about $2 million shy of the $23 million case. The $1 million variance there is because we'd like to keep $1 million in the bank for working capital, so that when the project comes online, they have some money off the get-go to operate the place and keep it going until the business reaches stability or stabilization, as they say. So long-term sustainability, this is what Rob and I are concentrating on furiously right now. We're working with a consultant called Altus on it. It's still in preliminary state, but it is advancing very quickly. We're meeting tomorrow with Altus again and trying to push this forward. An important touch point on this on the stability is really the ratio between leasable and non-leasable space. The idea is that you need enough leasable that you can support the non-leasable space. So the idea here is the third-party lease revenues basically cover your operating costs. That's only one portion of the cost that you need to cover. So the event revenue is still important, and it contributes to a capital reserve fund, or like in a condo, they call that a reserve fund. So the idea is that when we, so here's our areas. It just kind of explains that ratio. So let's just look at the A-B case. That's really what we're focusing on. But so we have about 15,500 feet of community space and about 12,000 feet of leasable. If you take that and divide it by these two, you get a ratio of about 62%. If you look at the Estonian house, and you see that they have a community space of about 17,000 feet, so a little larger than what we're proposing, but that ratio drops to about 33%. And we feel that that's what really is the issue with sustainability and why the new center is better poised for longevity. So when you look at the case here, we've recently readjusted these numbers here. We did some reevaluation of the event revenue, but basically our annual revenue for the base case is about $725,000. We have about $500,000 in cost to operate it. The annual cash flow is about $225,000. We can put $134,000 of that into the reserve fund every year, and end up with free cash flow of about $92,000 that we can use to support programs. So in short, there's the summary again that we just saw, and that compares to an Estonian house right now that is not doing too well in those areas. So now I'd like to get into the legal structure. This isn't really my expertise, but I will get into a little bit more of what their targets are and what they're trying to do. We're trying to meet the compliance requirements of each of the 4 orgs because the 4 orgs are so different. Some are banks, some are charities, some are non-for-profits. We have to make sure that the new entity is able to meet all of their compliance requirements. It must allow for the amalgamation of 9 and 11 Madison because we want those properties to become one for zoning reasons. And we're hoping to allow the ECU to provide construction financing if desired. Not so sure if that is going to happen, but it's always nice to try and work within the community. They're looking at the governance of the center, so not just what we need currently, but what we'll need going forward from a management perspective, and make sure that it's not such a complicated entity that it's difficult to manage on a day-to-day basis or doing annual reports. Tax management, of course, is very, very important, not only for the disposition of the Estonian house lands, but also for the ongoing operations of the center. And then, of course, charitable status, they need to consider that we have a component of that because we'll be looking for donations, and of course donations, they want to see tax receipts. So that's really the end of my presentation. I think I'll hand it back to Karen now and put the floor open to questions.
Just going to move things around a little bit for everybody's favorite part of the evening. Questions and answers. So we're going to have our various experts and organizations, the heads of the organizations and representatives at the front here, so you can direct your questions to them. And we've got about 35 minutes for this section of the evening. We would like to close it at 8:30 so everybody can get home at the time that we promised that you could. You said that last time. I remember. I remember that. So again, if I could just go over a few ground rules, please limit to one question at a time. And Eric here at the front, Eric Sayre, who's Estonian House board member, he's just going to be keeping an eye on the time and helping us out just to move things along. And if you could please come to the microphone there to answer your question. Or Dimitri, do you want them at that microphone? Is that better? That one? Okay. So because Dimitri over there is videoing tonight's meeting, just so that we have a good record of everything, and we will post it on the website as well. And I would encourage you to go to estoniancenter.ca for a wealth of information on the center. including a good list of Q's and A's and background information. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask all the folks here at the front to introduce themselves. David, you already know.
Michael Holmberg, Estonian Foundation.
Rob Deutschman, Project Manager.
Mihkel Liik, Eesti Pank.
Raivo Remmel, Eesti Maja.
Alar Kongats, the architect.
Thank you so much. So would someone like to come and ask the first question tonight? And please don't forget just to state your name, and that would be really helpful. Thank you.
My name's Toomas Marle. I am a strong supporter of this project. And I beg the moderator that I have one topic that I have a number of questions on. May I ask a number of questions? They're short questions, mostly.
What do you mean by a number?
Depending on the answers, not more than 5.
5.
Okay?
Okay.
But the topic
Let's get started and see how we go.
Okay. The topic that I would like to focus on is the capital contribution campaign. And it seems to me, and please clarify, my understanding is that the difference between 17 million and 22 million for the lower contingency case to the base case is dependent on the $5 million capital contribution campaign. Is that more or less correct?
Partly correct. It's also, there's a range that we can achieve with the property itself, this property being sold. So there's about a $4 million range that we can get on that property. So the $17 million is calculated based on the minimum amount on that property, but if we do better than that, that takes us above the 17 million, and then that makes the requirement for the capital campaign smaller.
Fair enough. Let me ask the question in a different way. What is the project team's goal with regard to the capital contributions?
The target actually isn't officially set yet. We haven't got the feasibility study back yet, but we're envisioning it being somewhere around $6 to $8 million is what we're hoping for.
Wow.
We want to
Okay.
go beyond what we need as a bare minimum. We're setting our sights high. We would like to set up a legacy fund that would really make a difference to the long haul of the project. As a bare minimum, we need to see something in the $3 or $4 million range.
Okay, no, that's fabulous. It's even more than I thought it was. So it is an extremely critical part of this project. You said earlier that within the last 2 weeks you've hired on the consultant who will be doing that. Are you at liberty to share with the audience who the consultant is?
Yes, this is a gentleman named Mark Greif. He's really comes out of the hospital market primarily. He does a lot of fundraising for Baycrest, Mount Sinai, those hospitals. We came to him through just doing some research in the industry, and his name kept coming up, so that's who we approached. And he recommended that we do a feasibility study to start so that we can get an assessment of what we feel could be harvested from the community, from a capital campaign, and then to actually implement it after that.
So a true professional with a good track record.
Yes.
Can we read about this fellow up on your website? Or?
I'm not sure actually if we've mentioned it on the website, but I'm sure if you Googled him, he'd come up for sure on.
Excellent. And are you able to share with us the basis on which he is being remunerated or incentivized,
There was a flat fee for the original feasibility study, and then he goes on a monthly retainer after that if we hire him to do the full capital campaign.
Okay.
So, and he estimates that capital campaign, depending on how successful it is, could range anywhere from 1 to as many as 3 years.
Oh, okay.
So
Oh,
it's an
sounds good.
ongoing. So, and there's really, the idea is that there's no reason to stop. I mean, once the building's built, there's no reason to not, keep seeking funds and try to build that legacy fund and support the center as much as possible.
But the impression that I get is that the project team has gotten a professional who knows what he's doing. It's not going to be like our fathers and grandfathers who went around to all of our friends and hit them up for $50.
Yeah, we're not intending to pass the hat. We will eventually, but really that is in the later stages of the campaign. That I'm now going from memory, but most of the campaign is raised very quietly with approaching individuals and doing interviews and that sort of thing, and then you actually get to the pass the hat stage, but later on in the campaign, and that's really for kind of the last third of what you're looking for.
Excellent. I'm down to my last question. I haven't counted how many there are. I'm down to my last one.
Yeah.
I'm down to my last one. For the donors that will be contributing to the capital contribution campaign, and I'm talking about presumably big donors, $1 million plus people. What will there be in it for them? Do they get halls named after them? Do they get an ownership interest? Why would people?
It depends a
contribute?
little bit on the donor themselves. Some we've been talking to a few individuals. Some are very interested in naming rights, so that one of the jobs of this consultant is to come up literally with a menu of items that could be named. So it could be a stairwell, it could be a hall, it could be a building or a washroom. I don't know, but he'll make that menu up, but there's other people that don't feel that's so important and really don't want to be recognized in any way. But it's not. It isn't an ownership type stake that they're
Good. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much.
Just a very short comment.
If you could just state your name,
Yes,
please.
my name is Maya Ilves. I have a very short comment. If our fathers and grandfathers did not go from door to door to collect the money that we needed for the Estonian house, we would never have had it.
Yes, very true.
Taino Enula. Couple of short questions, okay, for all our easy ones. The first comment is that at the last meeting, certainly the chefs came in and said that the kitchen in the basement is unworkable, and I'm glad to hear that you're addressing that. If you could make the hall smaller and a kitchen adjacent to the hall, it would be probably the right way to go. Okay, any comment on that?
Well, I think that's what we're exploring right now is where to actually locate the kitchen, whether it is in the basement or whether it should be on an upper level. Both have advantages and disadvantages to the chefs, and that was part of the discussion we had last night. There is some merit in looking at the size of the hall versus the size of the backup space, where it provides better value for the community, provides better options in terms of how the hall might be leased out to members of the community. Also making sure that the hall, when it is leased out, is going to be properly serviced so that people will want to come back, recommend the hall to friends, and it'll be a continuously successful business in terms of leasing out a really, really lovely room within the city.
The other question I have a lot, and it's again one of a site plan design. You showed the space for what is referred to as the Estonian Credit Union space underneath the hall, and I'm not sure whether that's final or not. But one of the problems that I have with that particular space is that it, in fact, blocks the access to those 10 parking spots that are behind the buffeteria in Tartu College at the present time. So that becomes an enclosed space without any access to it. And there's two problems there. One problem is that even if we did want to downstream make us kind of a pathway to that particular parking lot, we might be able to do it if there wasn't a wall there. But two, the other problem that we have is Tartu College. That's where they haul their garbage out from, okay, from behind there. So how come
They actually haul it from Madison Avenue. They don't haul it from the back. The garbage is accessible off Madison. Certainly with the plans for Vemu, it would still allow access to the back between where the ramp is right now and where the north face of Tartu Wall is. There is proposed an access through that allows that service space to continue operation.
Okay, so we continue to be able to use those 10 parking spots?
Well,
as
that would be up to Tartu College. But one of the things that Tartu College has identified as, in terms of parking support for the center, is to, right now, have available 25 to approximately 30 spaces that are in the basement, in the parking garage of Tartu
And
College.
they would be key access?
That has not been resolved in terms of the operation of it, but it is intended for community use.
Another follow-up on the site plan, Alar, and again, for our own purposes, I know that we agreed to provide a pathway from Madison to Huron for the public at large to go from one street to the other without going to Bloor Street. But it seems to me that once things change, that we have that, I guess, condo development of 39 stories behind the Madison property. In effect, our access from the property 9 Madison to Huron has now been frustrated. And as such, can we not use that as a rationale for saying that we cannot put in a pathway from across our property to Huron, and that would allow you some more flexibility in adjusting the, I guess, the retail space or Estonian credit union space underneath the hall and shimmy it up to the lobby space.
There's a couple of real advantages to maintaining the access space through. First, it's a planning initiative that the city, it's dear to the city. It's an important aspect of connecting, creating a parallel sort of commercial, social street parallel to Bloor Street that's quieter, smaller in scale, not unlike Cumberland Avenue. The other big advantage for the Estonian Center is that it actually would then also be a continuous street that would connect to Spadina Avenue and connect directly to the TTC subway station. So if we put the slide up, I can show you how that would occur. Oh, actually, David had you had a slide, right, that showed the parcels? Yeah, go back. Yeah, okay. It is also a part of the, sorry. It is also part of the requirement for the adjacent developer to do the same thing. He has an obligation to also provide a through, and we have had discussions with them as well. That was one of the things that, an informal discussion with them as well, and with their architects as well.
Just trying to give you some more flexibility on it.
Well, but the flexibility is also that it provides better access to public transportation for the community center, rather than sort of walking down, south onto.
I understand that, Alar.
Yeah.
Don't have to explain it.
Okay, now we're up to 4 questions.
Okay.
I've been counting.
Precedent was 6.
Yeah, but you were here last time. So you have I think about 10 in your bank right now. Okay.
Tere, Ilmar Lepik on minu nimi. At the January 31st meeting, I raised a question with Jan Meri about 9 Madison and 11 Madison and Tartu College, and who will own 9 and 11 Madison, or will it be part of Tartu College? And Jan Meri answered that they will be 2 separate entities, built together, but 2 separate entities. I just want to expand on that just a little bit in that when we proceed with the sale of the Estonian house and the money that we get from the sale of the Estonian house, will that money go towards the purchase of Madison 9 and Madison 11? Will it be owned by the Estonian house?
So I answer that? Sure. I'm on the Legal and Tax Committee. The thinking and the analysis that we've been doing on this is that since the bulk of the proceeds for this development are coming from the Estonian House, in the absence of any other good reason, Estonian House should own the new center that's being built. Those funds would be used to acquire 9 and 11 Madison. But as the thinking has advanced and we're looking at whether there's any better way to do this, the idea of introducing a charity into the mix has come up. Charity has a number of advantages. A charity can solve some tax issues that might be associated with the Estonian House. A charity might allow for lower real property taxes, and most importantly, a charity would allow for giving tax donations to donors or part of the campaign, and thus make that a lot more likely, or at least a lot richer. But it would also facilitate the ability of our organizations, particularly something like the Estonian Foundation, to provide funding, because a charity-to-charity donation is very easy. So how might we do that? Well, the Estonian House could create a charity. It could be the sole member of the charity. It could organize it such that all or some of its board members are necessarily board members of that charity, and thereby control it very much like a corporation might have a subsidiary. It's a separate entity below it. It has different features, assisting in the kinds of things that I've just described, but it's still, at that point, fully controlled by Estonian House and its board. Now, we could evolve that thinking a little further. I know, I think it was Mark Alexar raised whether Esto House is the best organization and a share corporation is really the best thing. Interesting point. It's not really necessary. We've got so many things to work on that we haven't really advanced that thinking. But that Estonian charity, rather than just have Estonian House board members on it, might incorporate other members of the community or other organizations in the community to have seats on that board, to truly make it a new type of organization that is affiliated with the broader Estonian community in a different way. Doesn't have to be settled for the sake of advancing the plan right now. The analysis right now is to make sure that we're doing this in the most tax-efficient manner and able to open the doors to funding in the most efficient way. But I think what I'm trying to say in the answer to your question, number one, never in the discussion has there been anything about Tartu owning 9 or 11 Madison. Not once. I've been at all those meetings, so where that comes from, I don't know. The charity could be organized in such a way that it is fully controlled by Esto House, or less if that's the best way and the group decides that that's what's best for the community.
Thank you, Mikael.
My second question I'd like to direct to David, if you can expand on something you already said. And that was that one of the conditions was that the Estonian House Limited or the 3 orgs finalize the purchase of 9 Madison before they sell Eesti Maja. Has that changed? Have we already purchased?
No, we have it under contract, but it is not closed.
So we haven't sold Eesti Maja either?
No, we have not sold Eesti Maja either.
Okay.
So the intent would be that we'd make sure that we have 9 Madison fully acquired before we let go of this property.
And the representative from the bank, Lil, thank you, David. Or Leek. Thank you.
Okay, you're up to your third question. This will be the last one, okay?
Thank you. The area on the retail level, have you, as a representative of the bank, do you plan on signing a 5-year lease for that area? You will be an anchor retail space, probably taking up over 2,000 square feet, and we want to make sure that any retail revenues that come in will make the longevity of the culture center sustainable.
Well, the answer is we're in the process of evaluating how much space we need, the structure of, whether we own the space, whether we lease the space, what have you. Here, we're also the anchor tenant, by far the largest tenant. We rent about just under 5,000 feet, between 4,500 and 5,000 feet. Our expectation is that we would be using about the same amount of space in the new center. We would likely enter into a much longer lease than 5 years, both for the benefit of the center and for security for the bank, so that we have security in future there, and that's where our business are, that's where our constituents are, and we want to be where our constituents are.
And you don't plan on moving into Tartu College then?
Not at this point. But again, we haven't finalized all of our evaluations. We've considered many different configurations, but at this point, we are leaning towards being a tenant in the new center.
You can give us you said long-term?
Okay, that's enough for now, Ilmar, okay? Thank you. That's like about 5 questions, I think. So does anybody else have, please go ahead.
Jan Teng. My interest is in visual arts. And I'm interested in making sure that we have a visual arts venue at the new Estonian Center. I'm also very interested in making sure that I, as a person, am able to contribute to this, as my father did when he was alive, to this Eesti Maja. He was looking forward to people like myself, and I want to look forward to people who follow me. I have one idea, but I need some assistance and some advice on how to do this. I would like to arrange for an art show, possibly at Eesti Maja. I would contribute all of the proceeds from the art sale to the new center. So I need to find out, A, how such an event could be booked, how much it would cost to book it, what are the boundaries or the questions concerning donations, and how that would actually work. And who do I see about this?
Who would like to answer this very interesting and generous question? Raivo.
Let me unwrap that. It's coming. Jan, I really appreciate the offer. It's not listed on the donations or the inflow of cash slide that was presented, but every activity that helps to fund the new center is very welcome. Thank you. As far as the nuts and bolts of how do we proceed with that, the best person to talk to is Ingrid. And where is Ingrid here somewhere? Ingrid Lahr, our manager at the back. And I'd be happy to be involved in those discussions as well. We do have some excellent opportunities here, especially since we've got a lovely little gallery out front that has flexible users. We can work that in there and determine how to go about it. Unfortunately, at this time, the Estonian House is not a charity and cannot offer tax receipts, but we sure can take funds and not pay tax on it. And we can talk even after the meeting today, because I know you drive down from Peterborough to get here. Does that answer your question? Sort of? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jan. I think you sent us an email too, didn't you, through the website? And I think you had another interesting question, which was about some of the security at the new center. Would you like us to maybe spend a couple of minutes talking about that since you're here? And do you want to just talk about what that, or just mention that question to the group? Yeah, because we haven't had this question before, and I know Alar put a little bit of thought into that today. That was just how to cover about the question of the glass in the new center and that kind of thing. Yeah, so maybe, Jan, do you want to just ask the question and then Alar can answer it? Yeah. It was a really interesting question, one that we haven't had before. So I really appreciate.
I was very interested in what the security arrangements are at the new center because of the fact that it is basically an open concept with a lot of glass, and especially when we're dealing with things like kindergarten children, which require, I believe, special security arrangements, especially when we're dealing with banks, where we know that in Estonia the banks have been targeted by various means, and I'm pretty sure that we're not going to be exempt from any such attempts. Also, because of the fact that if we have a venue in a multi-purpose facility, how is the security arrangements going to be, or what are the security arrangements going to be available for that kind of a situation? I personally had experience in setting up shows at Fleming College where we had a lot of art, well, not a lot, but we did have a number of pieces of art stolen over the years. So there is a special problem with the visual arts in that regard. There is also a further problem in that we are now experiencing all over Europe and in the United States, and I presume also in Canada, interference with servers and with electronic surveillance, especially in dealing with sensitive areas like the consulate and the banks and other facilities which require servers to be housed in a new facility. And consequently, I have a series of questions relating to that kind of security.
Great, thank you so much.
Certainly the building's going to have its own security system where the doors are going to be monitored. There will be cameras throughout the facility. So, for instance, if part of the facility is part of a gallery space, for instance, that space will be monitored the same way that any public art gallery would be monitored. There would be security at the doors. So, in terms of access to it, in off hours or when the gallery isn't open, there would also be cameras and motion detectors that would signal any intrusion into that space. It will be technologically advanced that way in terms of security. The notion of the glass, safety and that throughout the building is an important issue, obviously, with a lot of young children racing around, especially on a Saturday morning. So one of the things that we are looking at doing is trying to contain the area of where young children are. For instance, last night, if we can control it onto the third floor, where it's a controlled space, where they're not wandering throughout the building or the potential of wandering down corridors and getting lost, that would, I think, be a very positive in terms of move, in terms of design move, in terms of how the building functions. In terms of the glass will be fully tempered so that it acts as a railing, so there's no chance of someone walking through it. One of the interesting things with the glass is also how it might become a potential public art piece as well within the building, where we potentially could have a series of curtains, drapes that allow screening of the building, and it could be blackout, but the weaving of those curtains and drapes could be part of an art competition that might be organized for the artistic community, for Estonians, and it could actually translate even overseas to Estonia itself. So there's the potential of how you deal with certain technical issues, but they can also become part of the art of the building. And I think that's a way of engaging a wider community as well into the design of the building.
Very interesting issues. Thank you a lot. And thank you, Jan. Thank you for coming and sharing those thoughts. We have a question coming. Oh.
One, just on the arts thing too, just as a reminder that there is a consultation meeting, I believe it's next Wednesday, for the various arts organizations within the community. So I would encourage the more, everyone to attend who's interested and think that's an important aspect of the center. Thank you. I believe it's located here in the boardroom at the, well, we can confirm that to everybody. Yeah, it's at Estimaya.
Okay, we have another question.
Hi, good evening. I'm Gadi Gold, and I have a couple of questions, but if I ask more than 2 questions, do I have to sit down and come back up and then
Well,
ask a
you
question?
know, other people have asked more than 2, so
Okay.
I think that's okay. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. So, and Piret, do you have a question as well? So maybe 2 quick questions, and then want to make sure Piret has some time. So,
My
go
question-
ahead.
Okay, sorry. My question is in regards to the structure. Right now, Estimaya has shareholders. When Estimaya is sold, what happens to the shareholders and their value? And also, is the new center, is it going to be shareholder-based, or are you going to change it to, let's say, membership-based?
Okay, so can the same person, okay.
I'll try. So let's remember what we're dealing with here right now are the assets of this corporation called Estonian House. So in the first instance, when this building is sold and converted to cash, the structure of Estonian House is exactly the same. It's just a different asset that the corporation owns. That cash then is used to acquire the property at Madison, 9 and 12, and then to build, with funds coming in from other sources. That's the simple way. So if it was as simple as that and we just stuck it to that, nothing so far has changed in the way Estonian House is structured. I introduced the idea earlier about involving a charity. And a charity is a nonprofit corporation, or it can be various sorts, but typically it's a nonprofit corporation that's registered with CRA as a registered charity. They are member organizations. Now, they don't have to have more than 1 member, and the sole member of that corporation could be the Estonian House. So can you sort of visualize, we've got the corporate structure we have now, we have all these shareholders, they elect the board is responsible for managing the business of that corporation, and the business of that corporation is managing the charity. That could work. That's something that we're exploring right now. The other topic that you have as to whether the current corporate structure, whether that should be adjusted or changed, well, that's a big topic. That's one that's been around, I think, for at least 20 years that I've been a lawyer in the Estonian community and heard conversations about it. In fact, the Corporations Act that the Estonian House is incorporated under is going through a change. There's a new act that's been proclaimed, and that statute is going to be modernized. And we're going to have to see, we've got 5 years to fit under that and to see how the whole thing evolves and what happens with this share corporation. I will tell you this. The Estonian House Corporation is a very, very unique corporate animal. In 35 years of practice, I've never run across another one. It's a not-for-profit share capital. Most nonprofits are member organizations. And it's a weird beast. It's an antiquated legislation. So where it goes and how it evolves is an open question as to what's best and what serves the community. There's lots of different opinions on it, and none of them are necessarily wrong. It's really a complex answer.
So, for example, the New York Estimaya is by membership, and it seems to be working.
Yeah. Estonian Foundation, the one that I'm a director of, is of course a charity, and it's a member organization. We happen to have 100 and some odd members.
Did you get your question answered about the shareholder?
Yeah, sort of, kind of. We'll see what develops. My next question was...
Okay, that's going to be the last one, okay? Last question.
Okay. All right. Jeez. Is there any place where we can actually write in our questions if we're only given 2 questions?
Sure.
Okay. And we will get a response? Okay. All right. So in regards to 11 Madison, and I guess this goes to you, Raivo, you mentioned about a PIC study done. Has that been done on 11 Madison?
Kadri, I think the study you're referring to is the Pinchin.
Oh, sorry.
Pinchin,
Okay.
yeah.
Has that been done
and
on 11 Madison? Do you know?
Pinchin is a consulting engineering firm. They do building assessments and
Right.
so forth. They did a structural, and electrical, and plumbing and heating and all that kind of stuff on this facility
Yeah.
here.
So have they done it on 11 Madison?
11 Madison is a parking lot, so.
Oh, sorry. 9.
No, you mean
No.
11, you do mean 11 Madison.
Pardon me.
11.
Yeah, 11 is the bank facility. Do you want to answer that, Ola?
Sure. There actually was a similar study done for 11 Madison, and it was done by Golder and Associates, and they did an evaluation of the soil conditions and also the building, and that much for hazardous materials and environmental. So yes, and there was nothing, it passed.
Okay,
So there's no contamination on that particular site.
okay, all right. And this is just a suggestion,
That's
it's not a question, okay?
Yeah, go ahead. No, I think you have a few things to say, so please, yeah.
A few years back, you did roundtables in regards to the Eesti Maja and the Tulevik, and I was wondering if you could bring that back and do that once again, because now you're looking at the insides of the building, and a lot of people have a lot of comments, and it would just, I think, bring us all together in discussing it as a whole. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you.
Okay. Piret Komi. I just have a question about the moving walls between the rooms. I've taught upstairs in the Norte room 2 classes we could not teach together because it was too noisy. So I hope those moving walls are going to be very solid or very soundproof or something so that you can have 4 classrooms together.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no point in having movable walls just as visual screens. I mean, you can do it a lot cheaper. So those walls will have a proper acoustic rating so that in terms of conversations and that can't be heard from one room to
And
another.
singing as well, because we sing.
Singing as well. I mean, they would be equivalent to what you might have at a nice hotel where banquet facilities are often subdivided into smaller facilities, and given the noise levels from one to another, you really do not hear until you go outside the room.
Okay, second thing, you realize that Tartu College has a large hall as well, so you're going to be competing with Tartu College Hall and Eesti Maja Hall, so I'm guessing you're going to have to make it superbly different. Just a suggestion. And another one, please do not shorten Eesti Keskus, Eesti Kulttuuri, no, hang on, project, Eesti Kulttuuri Keskuse projekt. Don't shorten it to EKP because that's Eesti Kommunistlik Partei, right?
Thank you. That's really good, yeah, very good advice. Thank you, Piret.
Merike Weiler. My background is fine art with a particular interest in architecture and design. So this is very exciting what we are doing. And congratulations to Alar Konkads and to all the people who've been working on this. I cannot believe, you know, the backstabbing and the bad mouthing that you hear from some of the people who seem to be rabidly opposed to any kind of change, and particularly to something that certainly the younger generations are going to really cherish and use. And it's in a wonderful location, you know, transportation hub. And I belong to what I call the Jewish Y, the JCC at the corner of Spadina and Bloor. And they have so many things going on all the time, and I visualize that this will be the same way. Different groups for children, for choirs, for all kinds of activities. And because I've been working for some time in the Archiv, which God knows, so we are all very intimate with problems like trying to get rid of the garbage and the recycling and stuff like that. So, you know, we have a group of professionals. We have an architect who has won all kinds of awards and things like that. So surely he will know how to deal with all the technology and the structures and things like that. Really, I think some of our community are not giving credit to the people that are involved with this. There were very many years when I completely abandoned the Estonian community because I found it so conservative and so backward in many ways. And so this is, you know, talking and dealing with some of the, you know, the generation beyond us again, the younger ones, This is very exciting for them. And this is a way of genuinely continuing and expanding a vibrant, vital Estonian community.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll let everybody go home.
I have just one simple question, and that
Can you just state your
involves
name,
the
please?
plans.
Just your name, too.
My name is Eda Sepp, and the plans, the way that's drawn right now, on one drawing, it goes directly to the back of the Huron, the tunnel I'm questioning about. It goes to the building, which supposedly is a condominium. But on another plan, you show the tunnel pointing to the left and going behind the 11 Madison Avenue. Now, I wonder too, the building that is going to be behind the 9 Madison is, can you go to the direct boundary of the space, or do you have a space between the condominium? How are these two buildings united? You know, the one that's going to be built, the high condominium, and also the one on 9 Madison. Now, what happens in between the boundaries?
Question. It's on, is it? Yes. I mean, that's a very good question, and that's something that we have been working with. We had a preliminary sort of unofficial meeting with the adjacent developers, and they're interested in also, you know, the prospect that their building is going to contribute to city building. We've also had discussions with the architects involved on the building doing the design in terms of how we can coordinate things like the through block connection that the city is looking for. We're also looking at how to deal with parking and drop-off at on their side of the property, how we can also contribute to their development by providing a roof garden that the condominium owners can look down onto, so that that the two properties do work. They don't work independently and at odds with each other, but work together. We don't have final solutions for all the things, but the synergy is certainly there to provide something positive and unique within the city.
Right, thank you very much, Alara. And I think that's, oh, do we have one more question? Yeah? Oh, okay. Okay.
No one is against this project. They're just against using Eesti Maja funds to fund the project. I just wanted to make that remark. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Lambito, I think, has a...
Yeah, hi.
Sorry, I wasn't ignoring you.
You sort of touched on it a lot. If the hall is to be used for the visual arts and stuff like that, especially movie projection, what thought has been put into blackouts? In the sense that not just a little shielding, you know, I mean, if you're going to watch a film correctly, you need a proper light shielding for that to occur. And with such huge glass walls, has that been considered?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely will be considered. I mean, one of the options is to look at a light control system on the perimeter, whether it becomes part of a public art or an art piece within the building that involves curtaining. The curtaining would operate automatically, as would any blinds on the exterior. There's also the option of how we subdivide the space so that it doesn't necessarily go out to the perimeter, but is contained within the center, so that it is, you can have a direct, you know, a blackout condition within the space.
I guess what I'm underlining is that if the thought is to put into projection, it can't just be sort of, it should be thoroughly thought out.
Absolutely.
It can't just be a curtain because, you know, I mean, I've seen it enough places where you draw a curtain, you look in the movie, and it's nowhere close to the quality that it should or could be.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a curtain that doesn't allow, I'm talking about something that doesn't allow light through and is appropriate to the function of the hall.
And I guess sound-wise, too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, those are all super, super important considerations in terms of how the design progresses. We really haven't gotten into the detail of that, but it's something that we'll have to address and work with the various community organizations that have an interest. I mean, that's one of the things as we've been meeting people, people have been expressing their concerns and we need this, we need that, or, and it's not sort of demanding, but to make the thing work properly, we need to have this happen, we need to have that happen. And I think that's what we're taking away from all these community meetings and sort of documenting that and then addressing that in the final design. And then also, just so that people are aware that these things are being dealt with properly and they're not just haphazard, like, a curtain that doesn't work properly for a blackout condition. We'll go back to the community groups and then show how these things are specifically addressed and that they're all taken into consideration. Because I think everybody wants a hall or a cultural center, an Estonian center, an Eesti Maja that functions properly and deals with the really wide range of activities that are going on in
And
there.
I guess, too, as we're talking about a jewel in the downtown, and if we had a exemplary projection space,
for sure,
it would blow the doors off other places.
But
again, it's
David's going to kill me, but there are lovely seating systems too that fold away into the floor.
Sweating now. Sweating.
Sort of nothing attached with that with the roof because it's been brought up. The green space that's on the roof. There's obviously the plan shows a terrace area.
Correct.
But then there's the green area. Is that green area usable? Like, can people walk on this? Is this a usable space, or is this like a city mandated?
Well, it's two things. One is it's an environmentally appropriate thing to do to try to control stormwater. So it doesn't. Toronto has a very serious problem in terms of stormwater control, and they've been spending a lot of money to separate stormwater sewers from sanitary sewers. So anything that you can control control the flow of stormwater off the roof is important. So it's important that way. It's important for the city. Well, it's important for the building also because it helps insulate the building in terms of acting so that it doesn't, solar rays don't penetrate the building and warm up the building unnecessarily. And then it's also potentially, I think you look at it more as a garden on the roof. There will be a large area where a communal type event can occur, but you can certainly walk around the roof. You can't walk on, obviously, but you have to view it as a garden.
It's sort of that green area, because you there's a terrace that's obviously where you talked about a tent and all that. But the green area around it, there seems to be a misunderstanding of what can happen there. I'm assuming it's a utilitarian space that we can't go and trample it because otherwise a green space wouldn't work in that respect.
Yeah.
So that people don't have a misunderstanding of what that green roof actually is or how it can be used.
One of the nicer green roofs within the City of Toronto is actually at Toronto City Hall. So if I would encourage people to go have a look at that particular roof, or even, pardon? That's true. So going up on the colonnade would, show you what it could potentially look like.
So in essence, it's not like a lawn where we can go do lawn bowling. I'm exaggerating.
Well, the center part of it could be a lawn. It could be.
Right, but I'm saying
if the Estonian community was famous for lawn bowling, they could certainly lawn
the
bowl
functional
there.
area would be, either have walkways or it would be green. It wouldn't be,
Yeah, it's certainly accessible. We want it to be usable. We also want it to be act as a bit of a demonstration place because, young children coming there, guides and scouts, this would be a great thing to demonstrate, how things grow and access to nature and that within the city, which would make it very unique.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you for those questions because I think we all learned more about the potential for a green roof and the true advantages environmentally. So thank you very much for coming. Before I forget, I would like to very much thank Ingrid Lahr for setting up the hall tonight and for the wonderful crew over there. Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you to Dimitri, who just ran out of tape. So that was really, really good timing. So thanks again, everybody, for coming. Please come back. March 14th is the next evening, so hope to see you again. And please visit our website. There's lots of information there, and we look forward to keeping in touch with you.